It's a pleasure to be here today. And as we're here, we're discussing the weather, whether it's sunny, whether it's cloudy, where things are at. I want each of you to think back, go back a number of years, and think back to when you were graduating from school. You're getting ready, you're getting your degree, and as you're getting ready to dream about your career, how many of you majored in something other than sponsorship? If you majored in something other than sponsorship, please put a yes into the chat. Put a yes into the chat if you majored in something other than sponsorship. And Kim, if we can shift the slide one or two. And I see it's unanimous. We see the yeses throughout. And the reality is, what happens is you don't study sponsorship. You don't go to school for sponsorship. So what happens is you start your career, maybe you're working in marketing, maybe in healthcare, perhaps even at a nonprofit. And then one day, all of a sudden you fall into it. And suddenly you're responsible for sponsorship. It's one of your responsibilities, or maybe it's your primary responsibility. And you try to figure it out. You know, you need to figure out, well, what should we offer? How should we set up our sponsorship program? How should we price it? What do we need to do to gain buy-in from our leadership team? How do we make sure that our sponsors are happy and satisfied? What is it that we do in terms of finding new sponsors? And some of you often even have many other responsibilities. So you didn't learn this at school, and it's difficult to find information to be able to learn about nonprofit sponsorship. So where is it that you turn? And today, what we're going to do is we're going to cover some of the basics of how to go ahead and build your sponsorship program. The first thing we're going to look at is the current situation. Where are you at now? What is it that you're doing, and how is it that you're addressing your sponsors? We're then going to look at sponsorship levels, not gold, silver, bronze. We're going to look at it through the lens of how to evaluate our sponsorship level from a revenue generation standpoint. We'll then walk through a method to increase our sponsorship, and it's a method that I term step up. And then we're all going to look at, well, what are the next steps that we can take to be able to boost our sponsorship revenue and build our sponsorship program. So a key question is, many of you have signed up for this webinar. You're here, you want to gain information. So why is this topic important to you? What goes through your mind when you think about increasing sponsorship revenue? So why is it important to you? Give some thought and type it into the chat. When you signed up for this session, what is it that you wanted? What is it that drove that decision? All right, so we have a few responses in terms of a reliable revenue stream, making events worthwhile from a financial standpoint, to be able to be successful with our fundraising, to establish long-term sponsors and partners, what other opportunities we can have, sponsorship opportunities, how we can build our relationships, and then other things tied back into revenue and existing plans. So it's key for us to recognize why we're here, and more often than not, it typically is to be able to increase revenue. And even the answers that maybe didn't directly connect to revenue, whether it's engagement or partners or build a program, often that does tie back into generating additional revenue so that your organization can thrive, achieve your vision, your mission, and move forward. And if we can shift slides. So how did I end up in this crazy field of nonprofit sponsorship? It wasn't intentional, that's for sure. And in fact, a lot of it was almost by accident. Eons ago, before the pandemic, even before the century, right? It was the late 90s and I was struggling, right? It was my responsibility. I was in business development and I was worried whether I would make the budget each quarter. And it was a concern of mine and I struggled. And one time I met with my boss and I had not reached budget 3 times in a row. And I was worried, would I be reassigned? Could my responsibilities change? Or might I lose my job? I was scared. You see, I wasn't a natural. I didn't have the quote unquote magic touch. There were others that easily mastered business development. And I sometimes wondered, why can't I be like them? And I was uncomfortable with the sales approach of push, push, tell them all about our offerings, would hear things like it's a numbers game. And I had my doubts. And I wondered, was I in the right career? Was I in the right field? And then I took a sales class over 20 years ago. And the light bulb went off because it connected with me. It wasn't about push, push. It was about understanding the needs of each customer. And that really connected and resonated with me. I then became a coach for the sales program and eventually a sales trainer and learned how to sell effectively, which differed from what I had been told. My results changed drastically. I had a newfound confidence and I then began to teach others. And I learned that for me, just like most of us, business development, sponsorship sales, it's not magic. It's not about being a natural, because if we step back, how many of us are naturals? Yet if we study, we learn from others, and we practice, we're going to get better. We're going to improve. And I had the privilege and the honor of learning a sales approach through Dale Carnegie and then working through for IEG, a sponsorship best practices firm. And then in 2008, I started my own firm in coaching and working and training others on how to enhance and increase their sponsorship revenue and results. And since that time, I've helped over 112 organizations with their sponsorship efforts and how to overcome with the major challenges, getting a board involved, making sure that leadership bought in, making sure that we were offering the right benefits, how to price it, what to do in terms of finding new sponsors. And all of these types of challenges, issues, insecurities that I faced, I dealt with over the years. And now I work to build confidence and capabilities in others. And with this background and experience, it's helped me to adjust to our world in the last two plus years where we haven't had in-person events. And it's a way in which to look at sponsorship in a broader view beyond just events, to look at it through a different lens. And if we can go ahead and shift slide. And the process that I developed and then refined is how to step up, S-T-E-P, up. And when we step up, we can enhance and build our sponsorship results. And when I'm referencing step up, we'll walk through it briefly and then we'll come back to it in greater detail. First is, what is our current situation? How can we transform ourselves and our organization? What is it that we need to do to engage with our sponsors? And then what's our path, our plan forward? When we follow these 4 steps, we're going to place ourselves where we can unleash the revenue potential, whether it's pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, or post-pandemic. And if we could go ahead and shift the slide. In all of the years in working within the sponsorship space, both my own firm, in a nonprofit, and with a consulting firm, there are 3 things that I'm positive about that I know for sure. One is you can increase your sponsorship revenue. You can build a revenue generating program. Wherever you are now, you can boost, change, and increase where you're at. The second one, and this sometimes is contradictory to what we're told, is that working harder is not always the answer. So if we're following the same playbook year after year, but sending out a prospectus, seeking the same responses, sending out the same emails, reaching out to the same folks, running the same events, and expecting the same results without making changes, that's probably not going to be where we want to position ourselves. In fact, it might even be a recipe for disaster, especially in today's environment. So as we transition back to in-person events, going back to what we previously did, typically it's not the answer. So it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And then there is a clear path forward. And that clear path, whether now, during troubled times, it's when we follow a prescribed and proven approach, that's going to help bring in additional income. And when we follow a plan and we knock off items one by one, step by step, that's where you'll see results, you'll gain confidence, you'll become more comfortable, more successful, and it becomes a cycle. The confidence, the success, the effort, the results becomes an upward spiral or an upward trend, and that's where we want to be. If we could go ahead and shift, Kim, please. So one point that's foundational, it's you must be willing to change your approach. You must be willing to change your way of thinking. And it may sound simple, yet it's not always easy. And when I say it's not always easy, I'm not talking about changes in terms of just thoughts, changes in terms of actions and what it is that we do. Now, here, it's a situation where if we don't make these changes, we're going to end up in the same place, getting the same results and not moving forward. So the question is for each of you, are you willing to change your approach? You don't have to answer that in the chat. Just want each of you to reflect and think about, are you willing to change your approach? And then if we can shift. So this is Ray, and he's responsible for running a small nonprofit with a staff of 3. He was juggling many different responsibilities, dealing with the board, dealing with different initiatives and programs, dealing with different funding sources, including grants and other events and other types of activities. And oh, by the way, he was also responsible to build or establish sponsorship revenue. And Ray tried to read a few articles, participate in a few webinars, and he wanted to increase his sponsorship revenue, yet didn't make much progress. Wrestled with what to offer, how to get others involved, tried to figure out how to navigate, deal with the board, and was struggling, wasn't sure what to do, and agonized over the increasing pressure to bring in money. We held an initial call and determined that we should partner, and we needed to get specific and be strategic so that he could feel confident and get the results desired and needed. So that's what we did. And when we did this, his results increased significantly. Benefits that were offered to sponsors were what they wanted. There were new offerings that tied into their needs, to their desires. And all of a sudden, it changed the dynamic for Ray, for his organization, and for the future of the organization. And the key point as we switch slides is often we think about levels of sponsorship and we hear gold, silver, bronze. So Kim, when you hear gold, silver, bronze, what goes through your mind?
I think of medals in a race or some kind of tiers like that.
Sure, so it could be medals. Sometimes people reference the Olympics. Other times people are fixated on gold, silver, bronze. And the truth is, when we're talking about gold, silver, bronze, maybe we're adding in diamond, platinum, maybe even wood, paper, who knows, toilet paper, what else, who knows? Yeah, let's look at sponsorship through a different lens. Because when we pre-structure our sponsorship offerings and create that gold, silver, bronze, or those 3 levels, how do we differentiate among a manufacturer or a retailer or a pharmaceutical company or a consulting firm? Because what happens within these different industries and these different areas They have different interests, different reasons to be there, different rationale for why they might want to sponsor. So we want to look at these sponsorship levels through a different lens or a different perspective. Level 1, this is event-based offerings. This is where sponsorships are based on a specific event, whether in person or virtual. And everything is tied into that one event. They're usually standard. The names and logos of different companies, they're pasted everywhere. On a website, on signage, on a t-shirt, you name it. The name and logo is pasted anywhere and everywhere. This is level 1. During the last year or so, most organizations within the sponsorship arena have realized that this is a very difficult and troublesome path, because offering those types of benefits in a virtual environment is very difficult. And sponsors now are hesitant, they're reluctant. Often they're going to back away. So we want to move beyond level 1. Level 2 is events plus. And here, what we're referring to is the offerings are centered around events, yet other benefits are added. Maybe there's advertising on a website throughout the year. Maybe there's e-distributions or e-blasts where a sponsor could be involved that way. Perhaps there's social media or direct mail. There could be other ways. So it's events with a few other benefits added. That would be level 2. And then level 3 is establishing a partnership program. This is where we have relationships with multiple opportunities, perhaps involvement with some of our programs, perhaps they help develop content, use of different communication channels, e-newsletter, websites, social media, where they're involved and we're involved. And it's stronger relationships with our sponsors and coordination to make sure that with this type of partnership program, we're going to be in a better position, and it's limited to our top tier sponsors. This is level 3. Let's pause now, and as you think of level 1, level 2, or level 3, just jot down in the chat where your organization is at. You can jot down in the chat, number 1, number 2, or number 3. And Kim, what do we have here? I think someone might be at 23. I need them to run the session. Kim, what do we have?
2 and a 3. 2 to 3 to a lot of people are in 2 to 3, a few 1.
So we're seeing where the ones who are in 2 or 3 are in a better position. And those who are in a 1, here we're going to look at ways in which to step up, in which to boost those opportunities. And if we can go ahead and shift slides. So if we have a partnership program and we list all the benefits and it's at a top tier, well, does that cover it? Is that effective? Is that where we want to be? And probably not, because most sponsors want to see the sponsorship through the lens of what appeals to them. So let's think about another situation and use this as an example. If we're going to build an addition onto our home, we may meet with a few different contractors. And if one of the contractors comes in and talks about their process and their tools, their saws, their hammers, screwdrivers, drywall, and they get into the specifics, is that going to be of interest to us? Probably not. Because what tools they use and the process that they go through, we're probably going to get pretty bored pretty quickly. Because if we want a new addition to our home, we're not thinking about saws or screwdrivers or hammers. We're dreaming of a new fireplace, perhaps a skylight, a new layout of the family room. So a list of the tools, that's not what we want. What we want is, how is it that we will feel? And how is it that loved ones of ours will feel in this new home? What is it that we want? What is it that we desire as an outcome? So when we're thinking about these sponsorship levels, perhaps there's a level 4 where we're encompassing the interests, the desires, and the outcomes of our specific sponsors in a way that connects to how we feel when we're building an addition onto our home. Because if a contractor is talking about their tools, that's the same thing within the nonprofit world. If we're talking about our programs, maybe a newsletter, our board, those are all tools. And if we're listing those tools or discussing those, we want to shift. We want to reposition and focus in on what the sponsor truly wants, the interests, the outcomes that they desire. We want to allow that sponsor to enable them to express and convey their interests, their desires, and how they will feel when they're in their own quote unquote new home. That's level 4. And when we could reach that point, that's where we're going to see major revenue increases. All right, if we could shift. So we're going to come back to the sponsorship step up, right? The situation, transform, engage, and path. And one staffer who ran a small nonprofit was struggling. Right? He lived with the pressure of meeting budget for each event. And he compared it to living on a roller coaster, where each event he would reach out to the same sponsors for sponsorship dollars. And then he would reach out to board member contacts and hope that they were able to reach out to others. And for the most part was signing up low dollar sponsors for the same events over and over again. And over time, the revenues began to decline. And he never had time to develop a strategy. He felt like he was on a roller coaster. And then when the pandemic hit, the roller coaster, it came to a screeching halt. Sponsors backed away from virtual events, and he wasn't sure what to do, what to offer, where to turn. And he struggled with how to move forward in an online world. Now, thankfully, things are beginning to change where there's live events, yet he knows going back to what he was doing, that's not the right move. Because there, the revenue was declining. It took a lot of time and effort. Board members would come and go, and sometimes they would help, sometimes they would. So he knows that there needs to be another way. And the question that he asked was, well, what to do now? And my guess is many of you have probably felt this way. So we're going to walk through the step-up plan, the plan of action to help deal with the stress and pressure of sponsorship where it's based on board member contacts or specific events, and deal with how to move away from the feeling that you're on a roller coaster and provide a plan to follow, a way that supports you're enjoying it, you're being smarter about the way that you work, and you're feeling better because you know that you're going to increase your sponsorship dollars. So I want each of you to think about kind of where you're at now when it comes to sponsorship, and is what you're doing now working for you? Are you raising the expected dollars? Are you and your leadership team, are you satisfied with the results? And if you answered no to any of these questions, then the system we're going to walk through is for you. So let's now dive right into the step-up system. And the first point of the step-up system is the situation. What is your current sponsor? What is your current situation with your sponsors? So first, you want to have a basic understanding of what those relationships look like. How many sponsors do you have? What is it that they're interested in? How have they participated? Why have they participated? You want to get a sense of where you are and how well you know each of your sponsors. That's the first step. The next step is to think about what the challenges that you have when you're beginning to move forward with sponsors. What are the key challenges? And often people will push this off. Yet when pushing it off, it's only pushing it off into the future. If there are challenges that are faced, they need to be dealt with. Typical challenges that I hear a lot include, well, I don't know what to offer. I don't know what benefits to offer outside of events. Right? Or I'm dependent on board contacts and it's hit or miss based on who's in a board position. I'm not sure what to say. What should I say to my sponsors? Or what should I send to them? Or what should I email them? Another challenge is, well, I have other responsibilities, major gifts, maybe individual support, events, marketing, juggling a lot of different responsibilities, and don't really have time to spend on sponsorship. So these are issues. These are often the major ones. So I want each of you to think about the challenges that you face and take a minute or so just in your mind and think through or jot them down and circle the one or highlight in your mind the one that's of greatest, that's the greatest challenge. Because it's critical that we understand this. And then let's evaluate where we stand on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of understanding our current situation. And when I reference understanding our current situation, both where we stand with our current sponsors and then understanding what the challenges are related to where and how to move forward. And on a scale of 1 to 10, just go ahead and jot down in the chat 1 to 10. 1 being really struggling, not sure what to do, haven't addressed it. 10 being feel very confident, have addressed those challenges or I'm aware of those challenges and are beginning to move forward. So on a scale of 1 to 10, just where do we stand when it comes to our current situation? Right, and see that there's a number of, there's 6, 3, 8, 3, 4, 5. So it's across the board, a number of different ways, of different levels in terms of where we're at. So the key is to make sure that we're addressing this. I had one association's executive, and she explained her sponsorship issues. And she mentioned that there were always issues in dealing with the board members. And when I asked her what she was going to do and how she was going to address it, she didn't really give an answer. And 6 months later, I called her again and we spoke and I said, well, what's happened? Where have things gone with the board? What's occurred? She hadn't addressed it. We then touched base another 8, 9 months later. I didn't ask the question. I just let her explain where they were at. And she was frustrated and she ended up leaving the organization. And I thought it was somewhat sad because she was very qualified. She was very competent. She knew a lot and she had the capabilities. She just lacked the confidence to take part in a way in which to move forward. So the point here is we need to address these challenges, both big and small, up front, because if we don't, they're going to come back and they're going to come back. And if anything, they're going to get bigger. The second stage for us to take a look at is transformation or transform. So the first part of this is what are the assets that we have that we can tie back into our sponsorship offerings. And when I reference assets, I'm going to be more specific. What programs do we have? Do we have an after-school program? Do we have a program where we're connecting with youth? What types of programs do we have? Are we helping seniors? What types of programs or campaigns or initiatives that we have? So that's one asset category, the programs, the initiatives that we offer. The second is, well, what about our audiences? Those who attend our events, those who may volunteer, those who are involved in our different programs, those who serve on our board, those who serve on committees. Who are our audiences and how have we leveraged that? And then the third category of assets is our communication channels, our email, our website, our social media. It could also be webinars or e-blasts or other opportunities. So we want to have a sense of what assets we have, and then how can we convert these assets to benefits? What is it that we need to do? What is it that we should do to begin to convert to benefits? And often an easy way to think about this is how can we connect the dots between our programs, our audiences, and our communication channels? So for example, if we have a program to teach seniors financial literacy, and I'm making this up, but we could have a lot of different situations depending on the type of nonprofit you're with, because I know in running these sessions, I joke that we have people on the line everywhere who work from aquariums to zoos, from A to Z and everywhere in between. So whether it's a group that fights a specific disease, a group that helps youth, a group that fights for conservation within the parks, it's all across the board. The question is, how can we convert or transform and work with a sponsor where if they're interested in who we are and what we do, we could maybe run an article in a newsletter. If there's a program, they could be involved in that. Perhaps they could get involved as a mentor in one of our programs. Perhaps that could be communicated to our different audiences. Maybe members within one of our audience categories could assist or support some of our efforts. So here the issue is how to connect the dots between the audiences, the programs or initiatives, and the communication channels. Because often we don't think about it that way. If we're working with a sponsor, here's an event, and you get your logo pasted here, there, and everywhere. So that's part of transforming. The second part is recognizing the opportunity in terms of how we're going to conduct the outreach. When we conduct the outreach and we mail them or email them a sponsorship prospectus, we're hurting ourselves when we're looking at our larger sponsors, because often they have specific needs and interests, which we touched on before when we referenced the addition to a home. So how is it that when we begin to transform, that we're going to change the way in which we handle our outreach? So I want each of you to think about where you stand when it comes to transforming your assets. And often I'll work with organizations where we'll put together an asset worksheet or an asset inventory sheet and begin to list or write down the assets and then begin to discuss how we can convert to benefits. So let's each evaluate where we stand on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 meaning, haven't thought about that in the context of assets, haven't really started to review or assess how we can convert to benefits, and 10 being where, that really makes a lot of sense. We've started to do that. And not only have we started to do that, we've put together plans, or we've started to work with our sponsors across different benefits. So evaluate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you're just getting started, 10 being you've really started to transform those assets. I see we have a 6, a 7, 1, 5. And the key here is not where we're at now. The key is, what can we do to move forward? What can we do to move forward? So let's shift the slide. And the next step is we need to engage. We need to interview our sponsor contacts. We need to ask them questions as to why and how they're interested, who they've worked with, what they've done before, because when we do this, we're in a far better situation. And for those of you who would like to receive an outline or a framework for a question modeling approach, feel free to email me at Lewis, L-E-W-I-S, at Flax, F-L-A-X, associates.com. So if you'd like to receive a outline of questions to ask, email me at Lewis, L-E-W-I-S, at Flax, F-L-A-X, associates.com, and happy to send that to you. The key is for us to go ahead and interview our sponsor contacts. Ask them questions so we better understand where they're at, what their interests are, why they might be interested, how they partnered with others. So we're in a far better position to understand, well, are they a viable sponsor prospect? Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're not the right fit. And then we want to energize the relationships. We want to activate the sponsorships. And here we'll give you a personal example. Years back, when I was much, much younger, I was dating my current wife and we were going to get engaged, and I wasn't sure what to do. And I kind of was a little clueless. Not that I'm not that today. Yet I wasn't sure how to handle it or what to do. And I decided that we would get engaged at a screen on the green. This is where they show movies, generally every other week or every week during the summer. And a lot of people go and you watch the movie and you enjoy it. Hopefully you enjoy it, assuming the weather is nice. So in getting engaged, I knew someone who knew the MC, and he called my then fiance up to the stage. And then he called me up to ask for a trivia question. Well, thankfully, she said yes to the trivia question, which was, will you marry me? And I share that not because of my own personal history, yet years later, I was working with an organization that hosted screen on the green type of movies, where they would run these movies 8 times a summer. And the idea of working with the jeweler, just like any other retailer or any other company, had come up, and they had gotten $100 or a couple $100 here and there for sponsorships. Yet when it came to jewelers, jewelry stores, they recognized that there are a lot of other guys out there like me, in the sense of they weren't sure what to do, they weren't sure when to buy the ring, they weren't sure what to say, they were lacking confidence, they weren't sure how to go about it. So when that jewelry store stepped in as a sponsor, it wasn't about our fine rings, it wasn't about the products that they offered, it was how they can build lives of young people, how they can create love matches, how they can help people live happier, more joyful lives. And then each week they would work with mainly, they would work with one person within the couple to arrange or set up that engagement proposal, and then they would have the proposal at the screen on the green. And when they did this, more people would come, because if 2 people were getting engaged, often they would tell others so they could come, they could attend the movie. And then it gave it a nice feeling. Everybody would feel good seeing 2 people getting engaged while they're watching a movie. And often the engagements would tie into the different movies. And for the jewelry store, this was great because they were positioned in a great way as an organization or a company that really cared about the people in the community, about love matches, about helping to connect people. And they started to promote this within their stores. So for people walking by the store, they would see a sign looking to get engaged or looking to connect with a loved one. And then they would offer different promotions and discounts. And instead of a couple of $100, this moved up from a revenue standpoint significantly. The reason I share this is the example with the jewelry store. Would that work for a manufacturer or a law firm? No. So by interviewing our sponsor contacts, we're in a far better situation to be able to energize those relationships and activate the sponsorships. And when I say activate the sponsorships, when the jewelry store is providing guidance, when the jewelry store is sending a representative to the screen on the green, when the jewelry store is beginning to offer sessions on the 3-4 steps to take when you're looking to get engaged, as opposed to focusing in on the 4 or 5 C's within a diamond. They shifted their focus, they shifted their approach, and all of a sudden they were speaking the language of people who are looking to get engaged. And with each individual sector, we can look at different ways that are going to resonate, that are going to connect, so that we're in a position to engage with others. So the question I ask you is, have you interviewed your sponsor contacts? You don't have to answer that, and you can in the chat, yes or no, but this is a straightforward yes or no. Have you interviewed your sponsor contacts, where you're asking them questions about their plans, their efforts, their goals, and what their next steps are, as opposed to our events, our activities, what we do? All right, so I see a yes or 2, and congratulations to those of you who are in that position where you've already interviewed your sponsors. That's exactly what needs to occur, because if we don't interview our sponsors, and I've seen this time and time again, if we fail to interview our sponsors, we're guessing at what they may want. We're guessing at benefits, and then typically we end up resorting back to logos pasted here, there, and everywhere, and we're not giving sponsors what it is that they want, what it is that they need, and more importantly, from a nonprofit standpoint, ways in which to generate significant dollars. So the key here is to make sure that we're engaging with our sponsors and we're interviewing our sponsor contacts. If we can shift to the next slide. So we've talked about our situation to be able to transform, to then engage. We then need to map out our plan forward, our path. And for each of us, this is going to be a little different, right? If it's a larger nonprofit, we may need to have to write something up. It may need to be 10, 15 pages outlining action steps, who's going to be involved, who's going to handle specific steps, how the board's going to be involved, and gain buy-in from the board or leadership. If it's a smaller organization, it may be much simpler. The key point is we want to have a plan, we want to have a path, we want to have a roadmap that outlines the steps that we need to take. I proposed the step up where it's situation, transform, engage, and develop that path. You may choose something different. Yet highly recommend that there is a plan or a path in place. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to be successful when it comes to your sponsorship efforts. And for those who have many different responsibilities, it doesn't need to be a 20-page, 50-page document. It can be a few simple steps to take, which will help you move in the direction that you need to. The key point about developing the plan or the path is we need to gain buy-in. Who needs to approve? Who needs to be involved? Is it people on the board? Is it prospective board members? Is it those who run specific programs who may have concerns or adverse reactions to corporate involvement? So what is it that's needed for us to gain buy-in? And then how is it that we're going to launch this? Are we going to reach out to 1 or 2? Are we going to reach out to 15? Are we going to make a broad, big announcement? What is it that we're going to do to launch our new sponsorship program, which goes beyond events and where we're working through a specific path or plan? And here, I'm a big fan of an action plan, because when stating an action plan, it's not just words on a paper, it's what actions need to take place, when they need to take place by, and what the outcomes or expected outcomes are. That doesn't mean this path can't change. The path can change, and the path will change. Yet when we have that written down, and we're clear on how to move forward, we're going to be far more successful. So for those of you, and here, you can jot it in the chat, you don't have to. If you have a path or a plan, jot down yes. If not, think about what steps would need to go in, would need to occur in order for you to move forward and develop that path. And if we can shift. So we've covered quite a bit. We've covered where we're at now. We've walked through step up. We discussed the levels. Are there other things we could cover? Sure. Within this time frame, what is it that you learned? What's the takeaway that you have? And if you could just jot that down into the chat. All right, so if someone has jotted down, believe in the process. Yeah, believe in terms of having a process. Someone else agrees with that. Other takeaways. The importance of buy-in and partnership with sponsors, absolutely. Now, going to our sources, our sponsors for feedback. One size does not fit all. Interviewing sponsor contacts and understanding what's important to them, absolutely. So I want each of you to think about what's that step that you're going to take. What is it that you learn? Diving deeper into the relationships to see what and where we can go to support their growth, absolutely. Yep. And then if we can shift. So we've each listed a takeaway. We've each listed something that we've learned. So the suggestion is we need to have a specific action step that we're going to take, whether it's strategic or tactical, in order for us to improve our results. We've spent about an hour. We've discussed different options. Hopefully you've reflected on where you're at and where you need to go. Yet the key is we need to take action within the next 21 days. We need to take action. So as you think about what you jotted down, either in the chat or what's going through your mind in terms of what you've learned or what the takeaways are, I want you to each think about an action step that you can take. And the reason that it's that 21 days is once we get beyond 21 days, emails pile up, other work issues get in the way, they take over, they take precedence. We may have the slides, we may have some other information, but we tend not to do anything. So the key is to take an action, take a step in the next 21 days. If we could shift. So here we've referenced taking a bite-sized step or a small step. When developing sponsorship programs, the key is if we try and go it alone, it's going to be difficult. We're going to need a team. We're going to need others behind us. And I like to use the analogy, a number of years back, I was out in the back shoveling snow in the alley. And I had been out there for over an hour. And I had maybe cleared a space of 5, 6, 7 feet, not a lot. And then this huge truck came by, a huge plow came by and just took all the snow and cleared a whole big path. And what stood out to me was it took me a number of hours just to clear a small little path. Yet that plow clear a much bigger path. It didn't just happen with one person, the driver of the truck. All right. The city had to approve it. They had to make sure they had the salt. They had to coordinate who would drive where. They had to plan who and how things would be handled. They had to time it right based on the storm. So there were a number of steps that needed to take place. So the key is, who's on your team? Who can help you? Is it someone on the board? Is it someone else on your staff? Is it someone that you know with another organization? And then what is their knowledge level? Are they in position to be able to help you? Are they in position to be able to move you forward? So I want each of you to think about that, and then going to invite 3 people to participate in a 1-hour consultation, complimentary, where we'll focus in on what we covered today, or we'll focus in on a specific issue that you want to address, either related to what we covered or something outside that scope. So the first 3 people that email me at Lewis, Lewis, at Flax, Flax, associates.com. The first 3 people that email will receive a complimentary consultation of 1 hour to review. And the key point for each of you is, as you move forward, what is it that you can do to impact your organization in a positive way when it comes to increasing your sponsorship revenue? Because in order to achieve your vision, your mission, and strive towards where you and your organization want to be, the key is to make an impact, to make a difference, and that's what's critical. My hope is that this has provided a few tips and suggestions for you to move forward. And now, Kim, I'll turn it back to you to see if there's questions or comments that you want to mention.
Thank you so much, Louise. I've learned so much that I would definitely be applying in my nonprofit. But we do have a question here from Mike. It says, what unique ways can you suggest for recognizing our sponsors that was a hit for us in the past?
Sure. So the first answer is to ask them how they want to be recognized. I'll also comment that what I found to be quite successful is to be able to publicly acknowledge key executives from a sponsoring company at an event or in print or in a video, because if we step back and we think about it, we don't receive recognition at all. People aren't patting us on the back, telling us, hey, great job, hey. And that's true with us. That's true with our sponsors. And so the executives at the sponsoring company, when we can recognize and acknowledge them, both their company and their names, and have them stand up, give them a round of applause, acknowledge in a newsletter, acknowledge in other ways that is appropriate and fits within our culture, that can go a long way in terms of recognition. So first is to ask them, and second is to recognize them personally. And when recognizing them personally, try to be specific with something that they have been able to do in terms of giving back.